Not just to people my age, not just to my parents, but somebody who could appeal to the next generation. And when I talk to my kids, I've got 2 in college and I had 2 in high school at the time. There's pretty much unanimity in our household among those that were coming in the next generation. Rand Paul was their guy. Beyond that, when I watched him in Congress, there's, a lot of times it's easy to get discouraged about what happens in Washington, and you think, boy, how do we turn this thing around? But when you're a kid, you're always told that, go do great things, because one person can still make a difference. And you know what? You lose sight of that. But then when Rand Paul went to Congress, he showed that one person really still can make a difference. The first time I really noticed him was his first filibuster against drones killing American citizens. And that was a big deal. And single-handedly, Rand Paul stopped that. Just recently, you may have noticed a couple months ago, the same thing happened with a 10-hour filibuster. So I am very proud to support Rand Paul, to work for him, and to bring him to my home community and let him speak to you with, and you know what, we've got some nice background music while he speaks. So let me bring up United States Senator Dr. Rand Paul.
All right, I have to let you in on a little secret. The real reason I'm here, I don't know if I can stand up and get out of the sun. The real reason I'm here is I'm trying out for the Quad City River Bandits. Okay? So they've agreed to give me batting practice tomorrow morning, and we're going to see how it goes, and then I'll have to decide, do I want to be a baseball player or be the President of the United States? You got to weigh it back and forth. We play a baseball game in Washington. It's probably one of the few productive things that we do in Washington. Republicans play the Democrats, and we play them every year, and I played on the team now since I came to the Senate, and I think we've lost all 4 times that I've played. The Democrats have a ringer. Guy's only 35 years old, and he played baseball in college. And they insist on pitching him every inning of every game for a charity game, all right? So I've said, look, you Democrats, you like regulations so much, why don't we have a regulation that says your pitcher can only pitch for 2 innings? And so far, no one's taken me up on it. But we're going to have a little fun tomorrow at the baseball field, and it is good to be back here. But I am concerned about our country. If I weren't, I wouldn't be here. I'd be home with my family doing something like the rest of families are doing this afternoon. But the reason I decided to run for office is that I am very concerned with the direction of our country. I'm concerned that we keep piling on debt at such a rapid pace. We're borrowing $1 million a minute. We do such crazy things. We actually borrow money from China and then we send it to Pakistan. I've introduced bill after bill to say, you know what, it's absolutely crazy to be borrowing money from China to send it anywhere. We borrow money from China to send it to the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt. It's absolutely insane. We borrow money from China to send it to Pakistan. So I've introduced amendments to try to get votes on these, and occasionally we have. And the interesting thing is, all the Democrats, they don't care at all. But unfortunately, half the Republicans keep voting to send your money overseas as well. I had a bill, or an amendment, that I introduced in the Foreign Relations Committee probably 6 months ago. And it was a pretty simple amendment. It said that we should no longer send money to countries that persecute Christians. You say, well, what does that mean? Well, we defined it as death penalty or life imprisonment for interfaith marriage, for changing your religion, or for, they have other penalties for, they say, for criticizing your religion. But it's a death penalty in Pakistan for all 3 of those. There's about 25 countries that have the death penalty, and wow. You give money to most of these countries. And so people say, well, foreign aid's supposed to influence behavior. Well, if it's going to influence behavior, maybe they ought to change some of their laws where they don't persecute Christians. But here's the sad thing, is that if you ask most of your neighbors, should we give money to countries that persecute Christians, you'll find almost nobody that supports that. But in Washington, it's the opposite. The vote was 18-2 to continue sending money to countries that are persecuting Christians. It was every Democrat and almost every Republican voted to continue doing it. And it's one thing if it were even surplus funds. It's not surplus. We're running a deficit. So we have to borrow the money from somewhere to send it out. It's obscene what's going on in Washington. You name it, one thing after another. I saw the other day we're putting out a waste report, so we collect some of these things. We spent $200,000 to study what happens when you give Japanese quail cocaine. Or do they become sexually promiscuous? I'm not making this up. We spent $800,000 in Afghanistan developing a television show to watch cricket. They don't have TVs in Afghanistan. 0.003% of the public has a TV, but we're spending $800,000 of our money to develop a television program to watch cricket. We left $7 billion worth of equipment in Afghanistan when we left. ISIS now rides around in $1 billion worth of U.S. Humvees. Go figure. We had a big debate on this, and this is still the debate over who you want to represent us. Which way do we want the Republican Party to go? We had a debate over whether it was a good idea to send weapons to Islamic rebels in Syria. So I raised my hand and I said, do we know who these people are? Do we know that they like us and are going to defend us and our allies over there? There's 1,500 different groups fighting in Syria. This is 2 years ago. And I said the great irony is you give them weapons, we'll be back within a year fighting against our own weapons. That's where we are now. ISIS rides around in $1 billion worth of our Humvees. They have our anti-tank weapons. What did one of the groups say? The group we directly gave it to, which no longer exists anymore because they were defeated and ISIS took their weapons, but they said that they would use the weapons to take back the Golan Heights from Israel. So it's like, really? We're going to get involved in a war where these people have been hating each other for 1,000 years, and then people say, well, are you going to do anything? Well, yeah, I think we do have to protect our interests. One of the biggest criticisms I had of Hillary Clinton is she didn't defend our interest in Benghazi. She just let the place go. And we were warned time after time after time that there was a problem. It started about 9 months before the ambassador was shot. 9 months before the ambassador was shot, you know what Hillary Clinton was doing? Sending our special forces home. Why didn't they want the special forces in Libya? They didn't want to offend the sensibilities of the freedom fighters in Libya. Who are the freedom fighters in Libya? Jihadists, radical Islamists, people who hate America, some of whom were in our jails already. We'd already imprisoned them once. We let them out. Now they're fighting another war in Libya. So what are we doing? Supporting Al-Qaeda in Libya. So what do? They topple Gaddafi. What do we get? Chaos. We get the rise of radical Islam. Now, a third of Libya actually pledges allegiance to ISIS. So are we better off or worse off having toppled Gaddafi? This is my point, and this will be the debate in the presidential primary. Do you want to always intervene in every civil war around the world, and does it help us? Does it make us more safe? Now, there are things we do have to do. We should defend our embassies. We should defend our consulate. But as Hillary Clinton was getting request after request to defend the consulate in Benghazi, what was she doing? Bringing people home. Colonel Wood, who led the security team there, said he was specifically advised by the State Department not to wear their military boots because that was a show of force that would offend the freedom fighters in Libya.
That's silly.
This goes on all summer long. All along, they're asking for more security. But you know what Hillary Clinton's spending the money on? She spent $100,000 sending 3 comedians to India on the Make Chai Not War tour. She spent $650,000 on Facebook ads. Seems the State Department doesn't have enough Facebook friends. She spent $700,000 on landscaping for the Brussels embassy. She spent $5 million on crystal glassware for the embassies. But in April or in August, when they were sending plea after plea to have more security, she told Colonel Wood and the final 16 people remaining there to defend the embassy to come home. So when Hillary Clinton came before my committee, I asked her this question. I said, did you read the cables from Ambassador Stevens? Did you read the cables pleading for more security? And she kind of acted put off and said, oh, like, that's beneath her. She didn't have time to be reading these cables. But you know my response to her? Hillary Clinton, by your dereliction of duty and by not defending our embassy, it should forever preclude her from being considered for the presidency.
Yeah.
people ask, how are we going to win? There's a real debate. How do Republicans win? If you don't remember, we didn't win the last time in Iowa. It's not just about the Republican primary, it's about winning the general election. We didn't win the last 2 times in Iowa. One of the things that we have going for us is that we lead Hillary Clinton in 5 states that were won by President Obama, including Iowa. Some of that's because I am a different kind of Republican. I'm a Republican who believes that war is the last resort. I'm a Republican who believes that all of our interventions haven't made us safer. But I am a Republican who will defend the country. When we have to defend the country, when we have to defend American interests, I will defend us. But I'm also a Republican that doesn't believe it's a good idea that we collect all of your records all of the time. It offends me. The courts have called it illegal, and it ought to end.
Yes.
I stood for 10.5 hours on the Senate floor saying that enough's enough. The court has said it's illegal to collect your phone records, and the president just kept doing it anyway. 3 different commissions have said, 3 different independent and bipartisan commissions have said they haven't caught any terrorists through this program. In fact, I think it's the opposite. I think we're collecting so much indiscriminate information from people who we don't suspect of anything that we're overwhelmed by the information and we're not doing enough to actually go after terrorists. I want to collect more information from terrorists, but less information from all innocent Americans. Through metadata, this is your phone records, any kind of records, they can determine most of the time your religion. They can tell through your purchases, they can tell whether you drink, whether you smoke, whether you gamble, and how much. The thing is this is none of the government's damn business.
Yeah.
People have asked me, what's the worst thing the president has done? And I tell them, how long do you have? It isn't Obamacare, it isn't the regulations, and it isn't even just the debt. It's really this collapse of the separation of powers. Our founding fathers divided that up, and they said Congress would have a certain amount, the president would have a certain amount. But Madison said we would pit ambition against ambition. There would be checks and balances so no one person and no one area of government would grow too large. But that's what's happening now. President Obama has snatched up the power. He's frustrated because he can't get what he wants from Congress. So he says he's got his pen and he's got his phone and he's going to do what he can. He's going to do whatever he wants, basically. That's not the way our founding fathers envisioned our republic. And that's what we have. We have a constitutional republic where things are limited. Your rights are protected. And no majority should take away your rights. Your rights come from your creator, and they're yours. They're innately yours, and they can't be taken away. But this is the biggest problem we face. The executive branch has grown so strong that we can't really stop them in so many ways. The laws that they're passing, the most onerous regulations that you have being passed upon you, I don't even get to vote on. Your congressmen and your senators aren't even voting on the laws. The laws are being created by the executive branch. I'll give you an example. There's one they call the Waters of the U.S. Waters of the U.S. is a regulation that now says that 97% of Iowa's land is federal and can be regulated by the federal government. How do they come to this? They say, oh, well, one thing's connected to another thing. They say, well, if a migratory bird could have come from Lake Michigan and landed in your backyard in Davenport, your backyard is part of Lake Michigan and part of the waters of the U.S., and it can be regulated by the federal government. How did this come about? By executive edict, by President Obama just waving his pen and waving his phone and doing what he wants. To stop him, to stop all of this, what we really need is to nominate a president who doesn't want to collect power, but wants to give it back. We got to have a president who gives it back to the states and to the people. People have said, well, how do we win? Some people say, well, why don't we dilute what we stand for? Why don't we become more like the Democrats? Why don't we be Democrat light? Why don't we be for maybe shifting the tax burden, but for not really cutting taxes? I say hogwash. I say let's be boldly for what we're for. Let's cut taxes. Let's cut government. Let's cut the debt. Let's cut the size of government completely. We looked at the tax code recently, all 70,000 pages, and we said it can't be fixed. Let's get rid of the whole thing and replace it with one single rate, 14.5% for everybody.
Yeah.
You have to realize what the tax code is doing. The tax code is chasing jobs overseas. We are losing American jobs overseas. We are losing American companies overseas. Burger King reincorporated in Canada. I thought the day would never come that I'd be jealous of Canada. How can Canada have lower taxes than we do? Canada's business tax is 15% and ours is 35%. We're more than double Canada. What's going to happen? We're going to continue to lose jobs. So we don't need to just nominate any old Republican. We need a Republican who will actually say, I'm going to leave millions and millions and millions of dollars in Iowa, never send it to Washington, and that's how we'll create jobs. Leave the money at home. Our flat tax is different than any other one that we've ever had proposed. Democrats will say, oh, that's only for rich people. Ours is for everybody. Not only do we bring the rate to 14.5, we get rid of the payroll tax. So if you make $40,000 a year, you pay $2,000 in payroll tax, it's not coming out of your check. It's going to come out of the business side of the ledger. So people who make $40,000 a year will have $2,000 more in their pocket, and we'll pay for Social Security and Medicare out of the business tax. We have to make the argument that government needs to be smaller in Washington. Keep looking down. I'm getting really close and hoping I don't fall down the stairs. Then I would really make some news in Davenport. But what we need to do is we need to be more boldly for what we are for. We need to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. We're pretty good on the Second Amendment. Most of the 55 people running for president will probably be good on the Second Amendment. I'm a big, strong supporter of the Second Amendment. I've gotten 100% awards from every one of them. If you don't believe me, come into my house unannounced and you'll find out. But we have to be for the whole Bill of Rights. I think most people know we're the party of the Second Amendment. We need to now be the party of the Fourth Amendment, which means the right to privacy.
Yeah.
We also ought to be the party of the Fifth and the Sixth Amendment. These are the amendments that are about justice. Fifth Amendment says the government can't take your property without just compensation, without due process. But what we've gotten to is we've gotten a government that now will take private property from people without compensation, without due process. We've got to change that. If I am president, no one will have their property taken from one private property owner and given to another ever. The Sixth Amendment says you have a right to a trial by jury, and you scratch your head and you say, who could be opposed to that? Well, I've had this debate on the Senate floor, and I don't like to name names, but with a senator from Arizona, and we had this debate over whether or not you should get your day in court. And I looked at him and I was incredulous. I said, do you mean that an American citizen could be sent to Guantanamo Bay without a trial, without a jury? And he said, yeah, if they're dangerous. And I'm like, really? Who gets to decide then? I mean, doesn't that beg the question, who gets to decide who's dangerous and who's not? And he said, yeah, no, but we've got to protect America, so we're just sending anybody. And it's like, well, who are these people you want to send? The Department of Justice has put out criteria for people you should report. These are your neighbors that you should turn in. People who like to pay in cash, people who are missing fingers or have stains on their clothes. That's me half the day when I get up early and spill my coffee. Half the farmers I've met around here, not half the farmers, let's say some of the farmers I've met around here are missing fingers. That's ridiculous to say. One of the other criteria of people you're supposed to report, people have multiple weapons in their house. People have weatherproofed ammunition. You know, this is crazy and insane. If those are the criteria for who we're going to suspect, wouldn't you want your day in court? Wouldn't you want a lawyer before the government comes to get you to detain you indefinitely? So this is a big debate that we should have. We shouldn't be so fearful of terrorists that we say, we're just willing to give up on the Bill of Rights. I'll tell you how I think about it. When I think about stopping terrorism and I think about our Bill of Rights, I think about a young sergeant who lives in the next town from me who lost both legs and an arm. And when I ask him what he was fighting for, he says the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. Wouldn't it be sad if he sacrificed so much for what we're supposed to believe in and we gave up on it while he was gone? Wouldn't it be sad if we gave up on the Bill of Rights when so many people have sacrificed so much? People say, oh, I don't need that. I'm not doing anything wrong. I don't need these protections. The protections are for everyone, but they're more specifically and more importantly for those who are minorities. There have been times in our history when we really have messed up in a big way. People say, well, I'm not a minority. Well, it's not just the color of your skin. It can be the shade of your ideology. You could be an evangelical Christian. You could choose to teach your kids at home. You could choose to have an unorthodox idea. You could choose to be a conservative or a constitutionalist. You can be a minority for a lot of reasons. It's very important that we not give up on the Bill of Rights. I think when we become a party for the entire Bill of Rights, we're going to bring new people into our party. And I want to be a party that is a bigger, more diverse party and a party that wins general elections. I want to be the party of the entire Bill of Rights. There was a painter by the name of Robert Henry, and he said to young painters, he said, paint like a man coming over the hill singing. I like that image. We need to be the party of optimism. We need to proclaim our message with optimism to everyone. We need to proclaim it with a passion of Patrick Henry, and we need to proclaim it like a man coming over the hill singing. When we do that, we'll dominate, we'll win it all. I want to be part of it, and I hope you do too. Thank you. Steve says we have time for a couple questions.
How are you going to protect us from ISIS? What's your idea?
The
You don't
question-
want to go there. How
Yeah.
are you planning on taking care of it?
The question is, how are we going to protect ourselves from ISIS? First thing we should do is not arm them.
Well, duh.
ISIS. ISIS now rides around in $1 billion worth of U.S. Humvees because someone in your government was not paying attention on who they gave the weapons to. Now, they said we were giving them to Syrian moderates. A CIA analyst wrote about this. He said the only thing moderate about them is their ability to fight. So we gave it to a bunch of people who we said were moderates, and ISIS took it from them. Some of the weapons Saudi Arabia, I think, gave directly to ISIS, because I think Saudi Arabia is a big problem. Who attacked us on 9/11? 16 of the 19 were Saudi Arabians. Saudi Arabia and Qatar have plowed millions of tons of weapons into Syria and also into Libya. They're supposed to be our allies, but they've been indiscriminately doing that. They also fund radical Islam in our country. So we have to figure out what we're doing. We have to think about who we're arming and whether it's a good idea. You have people in my party who want to bomb Assad and ISIS simultaneously. That is the dumbest thing I have ever heard, and you should be laughed out of any intelligent debate if you want to bomb both sides of a war. Do we have to do something? The first thing we have to do is, from the very beginning, we shouldn't have been sending arms into the Syrian civil war before ISIS came about. ISIS came about and grew because of all those arms. Also, they wanted to bomb Assad, and I was the leading voice against bombing Assad. Why?
Thank you.
Because if you bomb Assad and he is gone and it's more chaotic, who's going to fill the void? ISIS. If we had bombed Assad in 2013 like President Obama wanted to do, and several in our party wanted to do, ISIS would be in charge of all of Syria now. Do we have to do something about ISIS? Yes. ISIS came within a day's march of Erbil, which is where our consulate is. So as much as I criticize Hillary Clinton for not protecting Benghazi, we do have to protect Erbil. We also have to protect Baghdad. And people say, well, why not just send our troops in there? Our troops could win. Our troops can win any war. Absolutely, we could defeat them. But an ultimate and lasting peace requires the people who live there to fight. It annoys the hell out of me that we've given billions and billions of weapons and time to the Baghdad government, which is now mostly Shiite. They pushed the Sunnis out of the government, and I've jokingly said what we need to buy them next are tearaway uniforms, so when they run, they can tear their uniforms off quicker. I met with some Kurds recently. The Kurds have very little respect for the Shiite government in Baghdad. The Shiite government made bad political decisions, and we supported every one of them. We supported Maliki when he was doing the wrong thing. Maliki pushed all the Sunnis out of the government. He pushed the Kurds out of the government. So when ISIS marched into almost all predominantly Sunni cities, they kind of said, well, we hate the Shiites in Baghdad, and we've hated them for 1,000 years. Maybe ISIS won't be that bad. Now, I think they'll discover ISIS is really bad, but they marched on in because they were essentially welcomed or not resisted against because there was no Sunnis in the National Army. So I know this is all convoluted and long, but there's not an easy answer. But first part is not making the mistakes that allowed it to happen. Now that it has happened, understanding that the ultimate battle involves a lot of pieces. You got to have a more national army in Iraq that includes Sunnis. When we won the surge with Sunni, a lot of Americans, and a lot of Americans lost their life, but Sunni chieftains fought. Sunni chieftains have to be back in the mix of fighting again. You won't win because these are Sunni territories. They're not going to accept the Shiites there. They're not going to accept Americans there ultimately, or Kurds. The Sunnis have to fight. The Kurds are good fighters. I would arm them directly. I would not send the arms to Baghdad. I would send the arms directly to the Kurds. We have $7 billion worth of weapons and equipment rotting in Afghanistan. If we're going to let it rot, or if we're going to destroy it, I'd drop it off in Kurdistan. Let them have it. That's it. That's okay. But all right. Yes.
Okay, please take a moment and explain. Your legislation right now is mandatory. What exactly is going on?
Okay.
I know it is meant obviously to some of it is alleviate the $7 billion funding
The question.
As you wonder, you realize the money that, when they pass in that budget every year, I realize it's to pay for the prisoners, it's to pay for salaries, and it's also to pay for debt. But as I recently visited Terrebonne, I was disgusted at the fact that as we walked by a certain room, in the front upstairs, there was urine and feces running down that wall because they haven't spent any money to get, that's my tax dollars.
Right. But there's sort of two different questions. The first is about mandatory minimums. Actually, let's do a survey. Who knows what mandatory minimums is? All right, maybe about half. And I'm going to take a minute just to explain what they are. For the last 20 or 30 years, we took away discretion from juries and judges to decide sentences. And we said it's going to be X. But X turned out to be pretty harsh for some people who maybe didn't need to be there that long. So what happened is a lot of nonviolent drug criminals got 15, 20 years, sometimes life. There's a woman named Mary Masterson from Mason City who is in prison in Iowa. She's been there, I think, for 12 years. Her parents are dying. She was a drug addict. She did some things she shouldn't have done. But really, 15 years life in prison for a nonviolent crime, I would let the judges make the decision. I'd get rid of mandatory minimums. I'd let judges make a decision based on logic, previous record, all of that. But my gut feeling is that nonviolent people don't need to be in prison that long, and I'd leave much more space for the violent criminals who I would keep in forever so they don't harm us. And as far as for prisons and things in prisons, you should be punished in prison, but you shouldn't be treated inhumanely. And obviously you shouldn't be raped. You shouldn't be beaten. All of those things shouldn't happen in prison. And so the prisons do have to be reformed. For a lot of the nonviolent stuff, I would either shorten the sentences or make them misdemeanors for the drug crimes, and I would let people get out earlier if they wanted to be in a work program. So it costs a lot of money to have people in prison. So putting somebody in jail for 5 years for marijuana is a ridiculous notion. Put them in much shorter if you do it at all. All right, one more right here.
What is your idea about a balanced budget?
Okay.
Are we going to get to that? I mean, are we going to constantly have a deficit spending? You guys have got to figure that out.
Yeah. The question's about a balanced budget. We borrow $1 million a minute. We have an $18 trillion debt. We have to do something about it. there's a danger that we destroy our currency if we don't. If you destroy the currency, read in your history books about 1923 Germany to find out what happens when you destroy the currency. It's not pretty, and it's chaotic, and it's disastrous, and it's blood in the streets. You don't want that. And so debt is not just a benign thing. You get a lot of lip service from everybody. Oh, everybody's going to balance the budget, and everybody's for a balanced budget amendment. Every Republican in the Senate voted for a balanced budget amendment in 2012. But I put forward a balanced budget that balances by cutting spending, and it balances in 5 years, and only 16 people voted with me. Because it's easy to be for a balanced budget amendment, but it's hard to put pencil to the paper and say what you would cut. So I put forward 3 budgets, and I'll probably catch some flack in the presidential debates because I cut spending. And I would balance the budget, but if you don't, we're in for a really rough time. I think we actually do need to amend the Constitution to say you only spend what comes in, because we elect people who don't have the strength of character to do it. The other thing you ought to do is maybe have term limits and turn them all out and get new people.
Oh yeah, I like that.
Thank you. Steve Grubbs from Iowa, from Davenport, is going to come up and tell you how you can help us if you want to be part of our team. Thanks.
Thanks, Senator. All right, 2 minutes before you run off. Everyone here should have a little booklet and a little card. We have an offer for you. So we're looking for people to join our Iowa Rand Paul team. Could be as simple as a yard sign. If you'll take that card, fill it out, check the box for a yard sign, you're on the team. Maybe you want to do more. We've got the caucuses on February 3rd. Maybe you'd speak at your caucus or read something at your caucus for us. Maybe you want to go a little further and be part of the county leadership. Fill out that card, hand it in before you go. And if you do, this is what we want to give you. You may have noticed that the campaign staff, campaign volunteers have these little lapel pins on right here. These are not for staff or for volunteers exclusively. These are for everybody in Iowa who joins the Iowa Rand team. And because of that, we want to give you one on your way out tonight. If you'll fill out this card, when you hand us that card, we're going to hand you a Rand Iowa lapel pin. And when you wear this to church, to work, around town, what we're going to ask you to do is people are going to say, tell me about that pin. It's a conversation starter. To win in Iowa on February 3rd, we need somewhere around 25,000 votes. That's it. When I tell my friends on the East Coast or West Coast that, they say, heck, that's a precinct in my city. We don't need a lot of votes in Iowa. So 120 people here tonight, that can be a big deal in winning the caucuses. If you remember, Rick Santorum won by less than 50 votes. So fill out your cards. We have pens at the gate back here. Turn them in. Decide to make a difference. Don't wait.